Yes, and now we are ready to finish our videos on the second meditation with a discussion of the essence of a body. And so, what is a body? That's the real question here. Let's look at this quotation. Perhaps what I now think about the wax indicates what its nature was all along. If that is right, then the wax was not the sweetness of the honey, the scent of the flowers, the whiteness, the shape, or the sound, but was rather a body that recently presented itself to me in those ways, but now appears differently. So, the wax, what it is, what its essence is, what its nature is not the sensible qualities. Why not? Because those change, right? We had one set of sensible qualities, then we melted the wax, and we had another set of sensible qualities. So the wax isn't the qualities. What is it? It's whatever doesn't change. That's its essence or nature. But what doesn't change about it? But what exactly is this thing that I am now imagining? Well, if we take away whatever doesn't belong to the wax, that is everything that the wax could be without, the sensible qualities, right? We strip them away. What's left? What is left is merely something extended, flexible, and changeable. What does that mean? Well, something that's extended takes up space, right? It's extended, takes up space. Flexible and changeable, we'll think of those as the same thing. It's changeable. It can change form or shape. Let's think of it that way, right? You change the shape of something, and the other qualities change as well. That's the idea here. And so we think of that wax. It was probably, let's say it was a kind of a cube, and he melted it and became a blob. Well, it changed. What's its nature? Its nature is that it's capable of changing. It takes up space and can change its form or shape. And when it changes its form or shape, what happens? It manifests or presents different sets of sensible qualities. That's what the wax is. That's what a body is. A body is something that's extended and changeable. What do flexible and changeable mean here? I can imaginatively picture this piece of wax changing from round to square, from square to triangular, and so on. Imaginatively picture. That means you use your imagination. Literally, you get an image in your mind. And we can imagine the piece of wax changing from round to square, square to triangle, and so on. But that isn't what changeability is. And knowing that the wax is changeable, I understand that it can go through endlessly many changes of that kind. How many shapes can the wax change into? Infinitely many. Far more than I can depict in my imagination. How many images can you have in your mind? Not infinitely many. I know there's a lot of shapes you can imagine, but you can't imagine every shape. Think of every blob you've ever seen. You melt that, or think of a fire and all the shapes of the fire while it's burning. You can't imagine all of them. You imagine many, but not all of them. So it isn't my imagination that gives me my grasp of the wax as flexible and changeable. It isn't the imagination that tells us what the wax is, what its nature is. How do we know then what its nature is? The intellect, the mind, versus the imagination and the senses. Imagine a blue triangle, right? Maybe your favorite kind of triangle, right? I like isosceles, so I'm going to imagine a blue isosceles triangle, right? Now to imagine, I'm picturing that in my mind. I can see the shape, and I can see that it's blue. It's kind of a sky blue. All right, so do that. Now, let's think about a triangle in terms of what a triangle is. A triangle is simply what? A three-sided figure, right? That's what a triangle is. And when we understand that, we don't picture a particular triangle. We're thinking all about triangles in general. We're not using the imagination. We're not thinking of these triangles as being blue or any color. They're simply triangles, three-sided figures. And really, we're just thinking about it in the abstract in general. And that seems very different. When you imagine something, it's very different when you understand it in your intellect or your mind. And so when we think about what the essence of a triangle is, we're not using the imagination. We're not picturing a particular triangle. We're using the intellect or the mind to grasp what a triangle is. Descartes thinks you're doing the same thing when you think about what the wax is. when you think about what the wax is, that it's extended and changeable, you're grasping that with your mind or intellect alone, and you're not using the imagination. We can see this. We can see this kind of power of the intellect if we think about this kind of an example. We can imagine a triangle using our imagination, which taps into our senses, and we can understand a triangle with the intellect. But now imagine a 1,000-sided figure. Picture a 1,000-sided figure in your mind. Get a picture of it in your imagination. That can't be done. And yet, when I say a 1,000-sided figure, you understand what that is in your intellect. And here's what Descartes is saying. He's saying, look, if you want to find knowledge of reality, you can't use your mind, your senses, your imagination. They are limited. Sorry, let me do that again. If you want to find knowledge of reality, you can't use your body and your senses and your imagination. Those are limited. They have very limited power. The senses can be deceived. Your imagination is limited. This is a false path to knowledge of reality. If you really want to find knowledge of reality, you have to use what? Your mind and your intellect. That's where you're going to discover the truths about reality. We see that with ourselves. How did we figure out what we are? What are you? You are a thinking thing. How did you figure that out? Using the senses? No. You figured that out using the mind. What is it? So a mind is a thinking thing. You figure that out using the mind. What is a body? A body is a extended, changeable thing. How did you figure that out? Not using the senses. Even if you hadn't watched that wax melt, right? If you left the room and came back in and the wax had melted in between, you would still think, what? It's the same piece of wax. Because what do you know about a body, a piece of wax? It's extended and changeable. How do you know that? Descartes thinks it's in your mind. And so ultimately here, what is Descartes saying about the mind and the body? He's saying the mind and the body are different. How different? Completely different. He's a dualist. He thinks you have a body. Ultimately, he's going to argue you do have a body, but that you also have a mind and that you're really just the mind. That those are the two kind of parts of you. But really, in essence, you're just the mental part. You're just a mind. And how did he discover all of this knowledge, supposedly? By using the mind.